Seriously? Out of all titles, The Jungle Book 2? Why not the second Jungle Book? Even Rudyard Kipling knew better than to call his The Jungle Book 2. Walt Disney's The Jungle Book 2 was released as a direct-to-DVD sequel in 2003, but at the last moment, Disney liked it so much that they threw in another $1 million to have it in theaters.
What could go wrong? Even less money?
Yeah, like you probably expected to hear, The Jungle Book 2 completely failed at the box office. And I mean, fell on its face and scratched its knee failed. But hey, good things come through unexpected ways, because if this sequel sold well, and John Lasseter didn't become CEO of Disney and Pixar, we would have gotten a sequel even worse than this, where Baloo and Shere Khan get sold to a circus in Russia, and Mowgli, the two humans, and Bagheera have to save the two, with Tony the Tiger going through a redemption. Not only would that ruin Shere Khan's character, but having the Jungle Book take place in Russia, or any other country for that matter, is a really horrible idea. Why call it the Jungle Book if it doesn't take place in India? And why does it seem like every third installment has to involve a circus? Like, don't think I didn't notice that with Madagascar in open season. And the only positive I can see in this is Mowgli and Bagheera getting more screen time together, unlike this movie. But I'll talk about that later, because we'll be diving straight into the plot synopsis first. Seatbelts, everyone!
Please let this be a normal field trip.
No! Cruising on down Main Street.
The movie starts off 1 year later at the Man Village. Mowgli, Hallie Joel Osment, who voiced Sora in Kingdom Hearts, is telling his new friends and family about his life in the jungle. By growing 12 pairs of arms, apparently. His audience includes his two friends, Rajan, Connor Funk, and Shanti, Mae Whitman, who voiced Tinkerbell in the Pixie Hollow franchise. After Mowgli and Rajan provokes Shanti's zoophobia, Mowgli decides to lure the village children into the jungle to sacrifice them, but his evil plans get ruined by Shanti and he gets grounded, now wishing to return to the wild. Meanwhile, Baloo, played by John Goodman, misses the man cub and decides to kidnap him, with Shere Khan, Tony Jay, following close from behind, since he wants revenge for being humiliated. Baloo and Mowgli reunite, and Shanti spots the strangely blue bear, alluring the entire village. But because everyone thinks she's talking about Shere Khan, Shanti enters the jungle to save Mowgli, thinking he's in trouble. But then she ends up getting into trouble by running into Kaa, voiced by Jim Cummings. Fortunately, Rajan, who is following her, saves Shanti and helps her look for Mowgli. The next morning, the village people are looking for the children, which raises Bagheera's suspicion that Baloo was behind it. Baloo takes Mowgli to King Louie's temple to keep him hidden, which is filled with loads of animals that aren't native to India. Hippos, ocelots, leopards, warthogs. Honestly, what the hell is this place supposed to be? But after Baloo insults the village and Shanti, Mowgli goes off to sulk and bumps into Shanti and Rajan. Oh, and Shere Khan as well. Mowgli and Shanti get chased into a temple that is surrounded by actual lava as Baloo comes to their rescue, but gravity does the work for them and Shere Khan gets trapped, with Phil Collins as company. After Mowgli has a very, very brief reunion with Bagheera, Mowgli says sayonara to his animal friends and goes back to the village.
That's it?
Yep, we went into a complete circle for nothing. The end. So let's talk about the movie. Before watching it for the sake of this review, I barely remembered the details of the sequel because the first and only time I saw it was when it came out. I wasn't even a year old at the time. But unlike Lady and the Tramp 2, I remembered how the Jungle Book 2 played out because the first Jungle Book movie was my frickin' childhood. And because I had a childlike brain when I was watching that movie, I immediately thought it was pretty good. And because I never watched it years later, I grew up thinking that. Until the age of 18 when I saw the entire movie for free on YouTube, and my thoughts at the very end were,
Wow! That was shit!
Yeah, first thing I'll say is that the Jungle Book 2 didn't need to happen. Like, they ruined a perfect ending to a cinematic classic. In the first Jungle Book, my own home is woven throughout the film, particularly the scenes where Mowgli chooses where his new home is, like the wolves taking him in, and Baloo trying to find the words that persuade Mowgli to leave. The tune then ends by becoming a song, obtaining lyrics that explains that tune's meaning. My own home. What will Mowgli consider his own home? Will it be with the wolves, the monkeys, Kaa, Baloo, or by himself? Well, to Baloo and Bagheera's surprise, Mowgli chooses the Man Village, and Baloo kicks off that classic bare necessities with Bagheera actually singing with him, because his worries are over now that Mowgli is safe. and they walk off into the sunset, which was what Walt's nurse teared up at, because it was just like how he had moved on. But then the sequel says, hey, screw you, we'll bring back everybody and let the writers do whatever the flying they want, including the addition of 2 new characters. I'll talk about Shanti later, so let's move straight to Rajan. With no debate, he's the most annoying character in this movie. Like, Connor Funk did an excellent job with the voicing, but Rajan just irritates me so much. He does so little with the story, and is such an evil little shit. Look at him. Look at that face! Did Rajan come from the pits of hell or something? Why couldn't you just have it where Bagheera meets Rajan and immediately... Why couldn't you have it where Bagheera meets Rajan and immediately gets reminded of Mowgli when he was a child and then grows fond of him? That would have been cool. But instead, all he does in a plot-related way is save Shanti from Kaa and tell Baloo that Tony the Tiger is hungry for cereal. So, first example, Kaa in this movie has no importance at all, which means that Rajan saving Shanti doesn't have importance either. If you just remove the Kaa encounter altogether and have Shanti find the mango skin instead, boom. Story would continue how it already does. And as for him alluring Baloo and Bagheera, you could have had to find out through any other way. And Rajan's existence is what prevents Bagheera from saving Baloo and the 2 kids out in the first place. So yeah, Rajan is a big anchor to this movie's story, and how the did he kick 150 pounds of muscle off a cliff? I told you this kid's a demon! But what about Mowgli? Did the sequel expand his character in a positive way? What the do you think? Mowgli's character is completely ruined. He went from playful, wild, and at a certain degree stubborn, to being the selfish dog shit and huge trickster, and sometimes a straight-up bully. He provokes Shanti's fear of the wild and laughs about it. He's as bad as Peter Pan, in both movies. And his complaints about doing nothing but follow rules and chores? Where the hell did that come from? He didn't complain about the village lifestyle once, and only complained over the fact that he couldn't enter the jungle. This makes him come out as a spoiled brat, an actual toddler. Was Mowgli possessed by Rajan or something? Oh, and don't get me started on the animals. Really, please, I just want to go home and watch something better. I'll start off with Bagheera. I really hated how this movie lacks the connection between him and Mowgli. Bagheera knew this kid since he was found in that boat, yet they focus on their relationship with Baloo. During that shadow puppet scene, Mowgli describes Baloo as his best friend, while Bagheera is a good friend. What a slap to the face, because Mowgli knew Bagheera his whole life, whereas Mowgli knew Baloo for a day and a half. The first and only connection Mowgli and Bagheera have is at the very end of the movie, and Mowgli says goodbye to Baloo while he cries and hugs him. But fuck Bagheera, I guess, because he says nothing to him. Couldn't you have it where Bagheera is still his no-nonsense self, but throughout the movie, despite Mowgli being at risk, he's secretly happy to see him again and fails to hide it? That would have been so sweet. But no, they threw away any kind of possibility there is, as well as Bagheera's character as a whole, right out the window. The village people are uninteresting, and Kaa would have been the second most useless character if Rajan wasn't the one who found that mango skin. He only appears for 3 minutes and 37 seconds and does nearly nothing. He only slows the pacing down by stopping Shanti and pointing Shere Khan in the wrong direction, which is later fixed by the Phil Collins vulture. And remember this scene? Well, this is more disturbing. Interestingly, like the first movie, the elephants and vultures are vice versa to each other, but this time, Hathi and the elephants have a little bit of importance, while the vultures do nothing. The elephants help Bagheera by attempting to keep Baloo away from the village, and while it doesn't do anything exactly, they at least did something, compared to the first movie, where they set off to find Mowgli, only for Mowgli to be found by Baloo and Bagheera later that day. As for the vultures, they do absolutely nothing, as I said, but surprisingly, they sound exactly like the original voice actors. That's pretty neat. But this time, they have a new vulture in their group, this obnoxious, beetle-brained bird voiced by Phil Collins. Having him die by Shere Khan was pretty kick-ass, but that's later ruined at the end after the climax. Wow, so far this movie took the only great scene and crushed it into little pieces. But what didn't they ruin? What did they add that was good? Well, I'll start with Shanti. Her character isn't amazing, but this movie finally gave her a personality and even a name. She's a mixture of Baloo and Bagheera, where she's no-nonsense, but can be playful at the same time. She's also a forgiving person, which really steps up later when she can't forgive Mowgli anymore after he finally crossed the line. And then to add to that, Shanti has zoophobia, the fear of the wild. Seriously, out of all the movies there are to add zoophobia, they choose the Jungle Book. That's perfect, to be honest. But what's kind of a shame is that they were going to expand this where Shanti gets over her fear and begins to love the jungle's beauty. She even had a song number and everything. But the writers scrapped that because they felt that the story should focus more on Mowgli. And because of that choice, they threw away a perfectly good song and made Shanti do and learn nothing. A real wasted opportunity right there. And how in the living hell can Raja and Shanti talk to animals? How? How?
Don't give me excuses. Give me results.
As I said, I wish Bagheera got more screen time since he's completely pushed aside. But I guess with the same reason for Kari, Mr. Huff, and Bernie from The Incredibles, I'm glad Bagheera got the amount of attention he did, because there might have been a moment that ruined him altogether. So, again, good things come through unexpected ways, because Bagheera almost feels on par with the character from the first movie. Bob Jones even eerily sounds like Sebastian Cabot. And I guess I could say the same about Care Bear being on par with the original, except for the part with him not knowing how to roar.
I'm talking about like a big bear.
Baloo being voiced by John Goodman doesn't bother me, but the difference between John Goodman and Phil Harris's voice is so noticeable that it gets distracting. Well, whatever, there wasn't anything they could do to prevent that. As for Shere Khan, he isn't ruined, but he loses that sort of charm that made him such a unique antagonist. But I guess you could look at this as a character development. Tigger is f***ing triggered. He's not going to play the smooth card anymore. He's going full on savage. He means absolute business. The best scene is when he crushes Mowgli's coconut head and growls his name. Damn. And with the characters out of the way, let's talk about the story, the main problem this movie has. As I said earlier, this movie didn't need to exist because of how the first movie played out and then ended, but it's even worse when this movie leads us nowhere. Mowgli starts off at the man village, and throughout the middle, he reunites with his animal friends, but at the end, he ends up back at the village, and only one thing changed, which is Mowgli being able to hang out with his animal friends whenever he wants, with the addition of Shanti and Little Goblin Jr. coming along with him. That changes nothing. That even ruins that amazing ending from the first movie. And Shere Khan technically isn't defeated because according to their cancelled third movie, he escaped that temple, which means that Mowgli is still in danger. I generally don't know if I'm getting a headache from this movie or the heat wave that's going on in my area, but the fact that they created a sequel that does nothing to make a change, let alone give some character growth, really gets on my nerves. Here's how I think the story should have gone. Have the movie's subject be about leadership and taking action. Have it where Mowgli is an adult. He's all grown up and understands about responsibility. A straight opposite from what Baloo taught him when he was a kid. Suddenly, his adopted father is dying, or retiring, from being the village chief, and trusts Mowgli to take his place. So Mowgli now has this huge responsibility on his shoulders and feels that it's too much for him, especially when some jackass character might take this position instead. You could use Buldeo as an example for that addition. Meanwhile, Baloo gets upset about Mowgli changing and blames Man, and especially Shanti since she had lured him into the village in the first place. He meets Mowgli and gets him to come back to the jungle, and because he can't accept himself as a worthy leader, he agrees to go back to the jungle to escape his worries. Shanti, who's an adult as well, mistakes that he's getting kidnapped like it plays out in the movie and decides to take action by going after him. By taking action, that would go by the movie's theme as well. Then when Mowgli and Baloo hang out, change it to where Baloo can't stand how less laid back Mowgli has gotten, and decides to try and get him back into the, quote, jungle rhythm, which would make that scene at the temple, while not important, relevant to the situation. Over time, Shanti overcomes her fear of the wild and goes through a character development, just as they originally had planned. Then at the final battle with Shere Khan, Mowgli is then put on the spot to be leader and instructs what Baloo, Shanti, and Bagheera should do, which could be the part where they confuse him. Afterwards, Baloo starts to let go and appreciate how much Mowgli has grown up and matured, with Mowgli becoming the new village chief and accepting the role as leader. And from his choices, Baloo realizes too that you can't always be laid back in life and starts to take responsibility as well. See? That's how a sequel should play out. It should be a movie that adds something in a new, compelling way and expand the characters on a deeper level. Think of those Legend of Zelda dungeons being your movie franchise, with Link being your main character. The first dungeon was hard, but the ones afterwards are more difficult than the previous, putting Link through more of a challenge. But that's how this movie failed as a sequel, by adding nothing. The movie adds zero except for the man village, and the characters learn nothing that makes them grow. Most of them don't even serve the plot. If you want to put Ka into use, you could have it where Mowgli runs into him again and realizes that Shere Khan isn't the only danger in the jungle. But of course, he's in and out as fast as Cyberpunk 77. The only two things I like from this movie, story-wise, is how they use confusion to defeat Shere Khan and that Mowgli and Baloo get more closure. But that's it. Nothing else. It's not enough to even save it from the rating I'm about to give it. And as for the songs, don't expect them to be in the league with Trust in Me and I Want to Be Like You. They're not impressive, and I'll be ranking them from worst to best. In fourth and last place is Bare Necessities. This version honestly feels like an insult to the original classic, and John Goodman and Hallie Joel Osment didn't do a particularly good job, I'm just saying. Third place, WILD. While it's kind of a groovy number, it's instantly forgettable, and Baloo twerking wasn't something I needed to see. Second place, Feel the Jungle Rhythm. It was a nice attempt and kind of feels like it belongs in the same universe, but it's not a favorite of mine, and the children's vocals is all over the place. First place, Colonel Hathie's March. Unlike this movie's Bare Necessities, this song sort of fits with the original, but it gets cut off randomly, and I'll take the first movie's version over this one. So that was my Jungle Book 2 review. This was a video I was looking forward to, but now immediately regret. I don't think I can rewatch the first Jungle Book without knowing how our characters will turn out. This sequel is something I don't recommend, but it's definitely better than Cinderella 2, the worst Disney sequel I can remember so far. But what's shocking is that this dumpster fire took the length to have someone go through a character development unlike this movie. 3 out of 10, it was definitely targeted for children. Okay, I think this video went a bit overboard to be honest, but even for a sequel revolving a movie children and adults love, they should have done better. But at least I don't have to visit a terrible sequel for a while. I'm invincible, baby! Nothing can stop me! Not even Fox and the Hound too!